From someone getting dragged by unseen things to a mad stalker stabbing his ex, these are the most terrifying encounters caught on camera. We'll start with the mildly scary ones first, but the deeper we go into the iceberg, the creepier it gets. So let's get to it. Level 1. The Unseen Hand. Imagine living all alone in a countryside home and every night you feel a presence lurking in the darkness. Sounds like a horror film, right? Except this is the real-life story of Britt, and it doesn't end well. Britt, a young woman, lived on a horse ranch with her dog Josie. Life was good, her horses were in great shape, and everything was peaceful. But then one day, things started feeling a little off. Britt began sharing videos of the strange events on TikTok. In the first video, she showed Josie staring and barking at an empty closet. It was a one-time incident, but perhaps the start of something terrible. Britt further shared a chilling detail that their front yard has a private cemetery where her grandparents and their pets are buried. It had been her grandparents' wish, but for Britt, that wish was about to become a curse. In another video, Josie was just staring towards the cemetery for no particular reason. Then a couple of cows showed up out of nowhere and started doing the same. And just to be clear, those weren't even her cows. Britt's horses followed suit, and now all of the animals were just staring at the cemetery. It creeped her out, but she decided not to think much of it. That is, until the cows started returning every single night, and it even freaked out the Uber Eats guy. When he mentioned the cows, Britt went out to record them again. The delivery guy accompanied her, but then he also thought it would be best to leave the property as soon as possible, so he left. And the second Britt set foot on the cemetery ground, her house alarms went off. She rushed in to check when suddenly something grabbed her shirt out of thin air. Her security camera footage showed a faint shadow running outside of the house that triggered the alarm, followed by her shirt being pulled by an unseen force. Britt was terrified. She threw the bag of food on the floor and ran out. The incident shook her so much that she didn't even come back to her house and spent the rest of the night parked outside in her family's RV. People on TikTok had different theories about the incident. Some believed the animals were just showing up to protect her from the evil spirits. Some said that they were coming to pay respect to the lost pets, while even a few more thought that the shirt pulling was her grandparents doing, just so she would acknowledge their presence. But the one thing that they all agreed on was to call a priest, never leave your door open, and never bury your loved ones in your front yard. Haunted School in the Philippines. The Philippines is the land of terrifying folklore and real-life paranormal encounters that blur the line between myth and reality, and this school encounter might just be an example of that. A school guard in the Philippines shared a video of paranormal activities in the school at night, and shockingly, he was so used to it that he didn't even flinch. He was on his night duty when he heard strange noises coming from inside the school building. The guard mentioned that he had often heard such noises, but this time, when he went inside to check, he decided to record everything. As he walked inside the building, the noises kept getting louder and more deliberate, but when he reached a classroom, it got hauntingly real. He pointed the camera inside, and the chairs suddenly began moving on their own. The screeching drag of metal on the tile echoed throughout the building. It was scary enough for anyone to freak out, but this guy stood firm and recorded the entire event for proof. The chairs slowly crept toward the door. When he stepped inside and flipped the lights on, only then did the movement stop. Seeing objects move on their own isn't something you see every day. To most people, it was just another video of paranormal activity, but for those who work late-night shifts in empty buildings, it felt all too familiar and very much terrifying. Level 2. Birdwatchers held at gunpoint. Encounter with an armed man in Mexico. When in Mexico, try not to wander off into unknown or secluded areas, unless you want to cross paths with a dangerous cartel. Unfortunately, two birdwatchers weren't aware of that threat and walked straight into it. Moments later, they found themselves face to face with the barrels of multiple assault rifles. In February of 2020, two tourists, Logan and Aaron, were enjoying a month-long vacation in Mexico. Everything was going great until Logan decided to go off-route for some casual birdwatching. They took a side road into a rural area. The track was bumpy and narrow, so they were driving at a crawling speed of only about 20 kilometers per hour. That's when they noticed a white truck speeding up behind them. They thought it was just a local in a hurry, so they pulled over to let it pass. But to their utter dismay, the truck stopped right next to them, and several armed men hopped out. 6 or 7 men with rifles surrounded the vehicle. Logan panicked and urged Aaron to drive off, but Aaron knew that there was no outrunning this situation. From what they had heard about the cartel violence in Mexico, the two thought that this was it. They were going to disappear without a trace.
No Espanol, please. we're just...
No problem, no problem. Wait. No problem. Okay? No problem.
Please.
You will.
Por favor.
¿Dónde vas?
Sí, han perdido los chavos.
Hey, vamos.
Please.
Shockingly, the men didn't ask them to step out of the car. Instead, they began questioning, asking if they were lost or where they were headed. Logan and Aaron didn't speak Spanish, and the language barrier made an already terrifying event even worse. Using hand gestures and broken Spanish, the two tried to explain that they didn't understand. In response, the armed men switched to their limited English. After a brief exchange of introductions, they asked why the pair had wandered so far off of the main road. As the tourists explained their plan for the day, though, the men warned them not to go any further, since the people that they might encounter next won't bother asking questions, they'll straight up just act. Finally, they shook hands and let them go, completely unharmed. However, in a later interview, the two mentioned that the incident left them completely terrified. They spent the rest of the trip barricading doors and barely got any sleep. This whole altercation was recorded on the dashcam of the birdwatcher's car, which they then uploaded to YouTube. People who saw the video speculated that the men weren't cartel members but part of a local community defense group, and they likely stopped the tourists to warn them about cartel activity, though no one can be too sure. High-speed heist escape. Armored truck dodges AK-47 attack in Pretoria. If Wrath of Man happened in Pretoria instead of LA, it would look a lot like Leo Prinsloo's real-life story. Leo, a former captain of South Africa's Special Task Force, is now the head instructor at Fortis Proactive Defense Solutions, where he trains people in firearm use and defensive driving. Every now and then, he also drives armored vehicles himself to stay ahead of evolving criminal tactics. And in 2021, one of these days turned into a full-blown action sequence. Leo was escorting a high-value cargo in Pretoria with his crewmate, Lloyd Mtombeni, who was just 4 days into the job. They were 15 minutes into the shift when heavily armed attackers ambushed them. Leo's armored Toyota Land Cruiser lacked gun ports and mounted weapons. All he had were his instincts and training. The attackers used typical South African methods by firing from behind to disable and confuse the crew. They shot 30 rounds, and 13 of which struck the vehicle. One black Audi stood out among the attackers. It was driven by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. But Leo stayed calm, and even after a tire was shot out, he continued driving and didn't let the attackers gain the upper hand. Then, he handed Lloyd an AR-15 rifle and told him to be ready. Their communications were jammed, which meant backup was also impossible. Still, Leo pulled off a tactical move. He led them to a hotel parking lot where he managed to spin the Audi sideways. He rushed to catch the driver, but the suspect escaped. The other criminals also abandoned their vehicles and fled on foot with AK-47s in their hands. He couldn't shoot because they were in a public place, but he was able to secure the cargo. The entire encounter was captured on Leo's dashcam, and once the footage surfaced, people couldn't believe it was real. His composure and control didn't just help him survive the ambush, they turned the moment into a masterclass in defensive driving. But Leo's story is just one example. CIT heists are increasingly common in South Africa. Sometimes the guards make it out, other times they don't. In a later interview, Leo warned that there is a need for strict action against these attacks before the whole South turns into a war zone. Do you want more real-life action stories like Leo Prinsloo's insane armored car ambush? Hit subscribe now. Level 3, Ghost Hand at the Theme Park. Theme parks, the ultimate escape. Until you see that one visitor who was never supposed to be there. Japan has plenty of theme parks, but Tokyo Disneyland is easily the most popular. With several wild rides, colorful parades, and favorite characters, it's a heaven for kids. But for one particular kid, the experience was not as cheery as the others. In 2020, a family visited Disneyland and the father recorded their day at the park. Later, while re-watching the footage, he spotted something strange. At first, they saw an almost ghostly shadow of a girl staring at them from a window. Since it's Disney, you'd assume that it was some kind of character, but they don't really do ghost types, especially not the kind that just stands silently behind windows at the park. Next, they went to see a lake, and the video clearly showed an almost decayed hand reaching out from the shoreline. It wasn't noticeable in person, but it was impossible to miss in the recording. Later clips showed more disturbing events. The same girl from the window appeared again, this time standing in a dark alley. In another window, the shadow of a skeleton appeared for a split second. The father shared that his son felt uneasy the entire day, and that feeling only deepened when the footage revealed a ghostly hand reaching toward him during the boat ride. The horror didn't end, even on the Dumbo ride. Something consistently felt off. Dumbo's eyes seemed to shift, staring directly into the camera, or maybe at whoever was holding it. The father eventually shared the videos with a paranormal YouTube channel. They reviewed everything frame by frame and agreed that something else was at Disneyland that wasn't part of the magic. When the video was shared online, it was met with mixed reviews. Some said that they could relate to the paranormal activities since they've experienced similar things at theme parks, while others just believed that this video was edited and could cause problems for Disney. But whatever it was, it sure was freaky. Child discovers bloody torn clothes in New Jersey in 2019. In 2019, a child playing near a quiet creek found something unexpected, something that left everyone with more questions than answers. Dave Kuroda, his wife, and their 5-year-old daughter lived in a house in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Behind their house was a creek where they often let their daughter play. They had been living there for the past 13 years and believed that the area was fairly safe. One day, when their daughter was playing with her friends in the woods, she came across a strange pile. The 5-year-old got intrigued and untangled it to find a set of torn-up clothes. The red stains on them were enough to shake her up, so she ran back to the house and told her father about it. When her parents came to inspect, they recognized them to be women's clothes, and rather than being torn, they looked as if they were cut off of someone's body. The pile included a t-shirt, pants, and undergarments. Dave's wife recalled that they looked like dirty laundry piled up near the entrance of the woods. The family reported the incident to the Bergen County Sheriff, and as the police investigated the clothes, it appeared that they had been in the woods for a couple of months, and the red stains were most likely from blood. After the incident was reported, the sheriff's office was flooded with tips, but none really helped the case. Fair Lawn Police Sergeant Brian Metzler told News 4, "We can't connect it to anything in town, so we don't have a crime. We don't have a victim, so right now we're holding the clothes with the hope that we'll find something out." And just like that, another unsolved mystery was stocked away in police records. Level 4. Road rage turned deadly. Road rage in Russia has become a hot topic online, not for just how often it happens, but for how wild it can actually get. In December of 2020, dashcam footage of a road rage incident surfaced on the internet, and people were genuinely stunned by how far a minor traffic altercation could go. It all started with a heated argument between two men. One of them was driving a white Range Rover, whereas the other car was not visible in the footage. The reason for the dispute wasn't clear, but whatever it was, it pushed the other man to pepper spray the Range Rover's driver. Big mistake. Within seconds, the Range Rover driver stepped out of his car with a pistol and shot point blank. He didn't even pause to consider that he was in a public place and anyone could see him or get hurt. He was too focused to put up a raw display of his dominance. The Rover guy fired one more shot and then the footage cut off. When the video was posted online, the outsiders were horrified, but the Russians brushed it off as just another Tuesday. Some speculated that the man was from the Russian mafia. However, those speculations were shut down when the Russians stated that the man seemed too amateur to be the mafia. Some Redditors even claimed that it was probably just an air pistol, which is not exactly lethal but looks the same as an actual gun, though that raises almost even more questions on what if someone mistakes one with a real gun. Woman dragged by tiger. Safari parks and zoos are meant to offer a glimpse into the wild from a safe distance. But when boundaries are crossed, nature has a brutal way of reminding us who's in charge. On the 23rd of July in 2016, a horrifying incident was reported from the Beijing Zoo and shocked the whole nation. While driving through the tiger enclosure in the zoo, people are strictly warned not to get out of their cars. But a woman named Zhao took that warning lightly and stepped out in the middle of it. Surveillance footage shows her walking around the car to open the driver's side door, apparently urging her husband to get out as well. But before he could move, a tiger lunged at Zhao from behind and dragged her into the enclosure. Her mother was also in the car, and she instinctively rushed to save Zhao. Tragically, another tiger appeared and attacked the mother. It ferociously clamped on her neck and strangled her in midair. The park security arrived and managed to scare off the animals. Zhao survived with minor injuries, but her mother was pronounced dead shortly after. The security footage later went viral online and sparked a widespread debate. Many criticized the woman for ignoring clear safety warnings and putting others at risk. But Zhao saw things differently. She claimed that she stepped out because she was feeling carsick and that security had failed to respond in time. She went on to file a lawsuit seeking 2 million yen in damages, alleging that the park didn't properly explain the agreements she signed and didn't take timely action to save her or her mother. Later, the investigation report concluded that the park had no legal responsibility for the incident. However, out of moral obligation, the park authorities still agreed to pay 1.2 million yen in compensation. It's hard to point who exactly was at fault here. Unknown woman in the attic. 15 years ago, a man shared a video online that shook the entire internet and left behind a trail of unanswered questions. Joe Cummings, a New Yorker, noticed food disappearing from his fridge. At first, that he thought it was just his girlfriend, but she denied even having touched anything, so Joe set up a hidden camera in his living room to catch her in the act. But what the camera captured had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with something unworldly. That night, as Joe slept, a woman crawled out of a storage loft above his living room. She lowered herself onto a table and quietly stepped onto the floor. As if that wasn't creepy enough, she walked over to the kitchen sink and urinated in it. Then came the real shock. She checked the fridge for food. When the floor creaked under Joe's footsteps, she ducked behind the couch and hid in plain sight. After Joe returned to his room, the woman roamed freely. She checked the pantry for some more snacks, grabbed some more food, and climbed back into her hiding spot with ease, as if she had done this 100 times. That day, Joe checked the footage and froze. Someone had been living in his apartment and knew the place like her own. He called the police, but before they arrived, he decided to confront the woman on his own. He climbed into the loft and announced that the cops were on their way and that if she wanted to leave, now was the time. But instead of coming out peacefully, she lunged at Joe, causing him to tumble back and fall on the floor. He realized that woman could not be handled alone, so he left her as she was and waited for the police. Eventually, the officers coaxed her down and escorted her out without chaos. To everyone's surprise, the woman had been living there for weeks. Apparently, she had come in from the fire exit or the window to steal, but found the apartment was too nice to leave, so she stayed. The officers stated that it was nothing new and things like that keep happening in New York. Joe decided not to press any charges since she didn't steal anything and didn't cause any harm. The footage was first shared in 2010 and went viral, but no further updates were shared. Finally, in 2025, Joe returned with 2 new videos and answered the long-awaited questions. Level 6. Female Uber driver held at gunpoint. In 2022, horrific news came from Pennsylvania, quickly capturing national attention and causing outrage. 38-year-old Christina Spracusa was working as an Uber driver when she accepted what would be her final ride. As her passenger, 22-year-old Calvin Crew, got into the back of her car, Christina tried greeting him, but he didn't respond, so she started to drive anyways. 20 minutes into the ride, Calvin leaned forward, pulled out a gun, and pressed it to Christina's head. She froze at the moment, but the constant nudging of the gun stopped her from having an extreme reaction. The man ordered her to keep driving. She pleaded with him, begging for her life. She told him that she had 4 children waiting at home, but he did not care. He took her phone and turned off the dash cam recording. And that's it. Those were the final moments of Christina begging for mercy and thinking only of her kids. That night, she didn't return home. Her family reported her missing, and 2 days later, her body was found in a wooded area, a single gunshot wound to the head. Investigators believe Calvin forced her to drive around for almost an hour while he accessed her banking apps, then shot her. And the most shocking part, he wasn't even the one who booked that ride. It was his girlfriend. Calvin was arrested a few days later. In court, his previous crimes of burglary and drug dealing added to the charge list. His defense leaned on a troubled childhood and the racial biases he'd faced his entire life. However, most agreed a painful past doesn't give anyone the right to destroy someone else's future. Finally, after a trial of 3 long years, Calvin Crew was convicted of first-degree homicide, robbery, and evidence tampering. He was sentenced to life in prison. The incident left the entire community in shock, but it hit Uber drivers the hardest, especially those who worked night shifts. Many were so shaken that they seriously considered quitting the job. The Facebook Killer. Cleveland had never encountered someone as sinister as the Facebook Killer, who picked his victims at random and vanished without a trace. In April of 2017, devastating news came from Cleveland. 37-year-old Steve Stephen was live on Facebook when he decided he wanted to take an innocent life. Why? Because he had been in an argument with his girlfriend, Joy Lane. That's all it took. Anger, emotional turmoil, and a mind too far gone. On the livestream, Stephen was seen stopping his car abruptly and approaching a 74-year-old Robert Godwin Sr., a retired foundry worker and a father of 10. Stephen told the man to repeat the name Joy Lane. Robert didn't recognize the woman but said her name anyways. Then Stephen pointed a gun at his head and said, "She's the reason this is about to happen to you." The old man instinctively shielded his face with the plastic bag in his hand, but it didn't matter. Stevens pulled the trigger. In mere seconds, Robert was lying lifeless on the ground with blood splattered all around him. And the most heart-wrenching part is that the world watched it happen on Facebook Live. The footage was removed within hours, but by then it had already been watched over 150,000 times. Later, in another live stream, Stephen called out a friend and told him he snapped and taken a dozen more lives. A multi-state manhunt began stretching from Ohio to Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan, and New York to arrest him. Somehow, the police managed to contact Stephen and asked him to surrender, but he was stubborn and did not give in. A day later, Stephen was recognized in a McDonald's drive-thru where staff immediately contacted police. But before the police could arrive, Stephen had escaped. During the brief chase, he went live one last time and said that he had nothing left. He had gambled everything and lost. Then he proceeded to shoot himself with the same gun. In the police investigation, thankfully, Stephen's claim of taking a dozen lives proved to be false, since no other victims were involved. Those who knew Stephen remembered him as a kind and helpful person, and even his partner, Joy Lane, said that the man was good to her and her children. None of his previous activities or behavior could explain the horror that he unleashed, but the world will only remember him as the barbaric Facebook killer. Level 7. Mad Stalker. From an obsessive ex to a mad stalker, and eventually a murderer. This is the story of Hidito Kotsutsume, also known as the Zushi Stalker. It all began in 2004 when Hidito, a school teacher from a wealthy family, met Rei Shibata, a freelance designer and writer. They immediately hit it off and started dating soon after. To everyone else, Hidito was a charming and well-mannered person, but behind closed doors, Rei saw a different role, one marked by depression, emotional instability, and aggression. Rei urged him to seek help, but he never agreed. She stood by him for as long as she could, but by 2006, the emotional toll had become unbearable, and she ended the relationship. Hidito could not accept the breakup. His obsession took a darker turn when he began harassing her with thousands of messages, emails, and calls. This stalkerish behavior creeped Rei out, so she reported him to the police. But instead of providing protection or a restraining order, they brushed it off with just a formal warning. As expected, that didn't stop him. In fact, things got much worse. When Rei got married in 2008, changed her name, and moved to Zushi to start over, Hidito's rage escalated. He felt betrayed and started sending her violent death threats until the police finally arrested him. But during the trials, the authorities made a fatal error. They accidentally revealed Rei's new last name and address in court. That mistake cost her everything. After serving just 1 year in prison, Hidito was released and picked up right where he left off. He sent her over 1,000 new messages. He even hired private investigators to track her down. And on November 6, 2012, he found her. He went to her apartment and stabbed her multiple times. He then took his own life by hanging himself outside of the apartment. The public was horrified, not just by the brutality of the act, but how preventable it was. Rei had done everything right. She changed her name, she moved, she filed reports, and yet the system failed her at every step. Later, Rei's husband sued the Zushi police for leaking her private information. The case sparked nationwide outrage and forced the state of Japan to re-examine its anti-stalking laws and enforcement protocols. Raped and killed for violating COVID protocol. In 2021, a horrific crime in South London forced the entire nation to ask one uncomfortable question: can we really trust the people meant to protect us? On the night of March 3, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard left a friend's house in Clapham and was walking home. It was a quiet route. She had followed all the rules women are told: well-lit roads, phone in hand, head down, but still it wasn't enough. She was last seen on CCTV at Pinders Road and then again on a police car dashcam. Shortly after, Wayne Cousin, an armed officer in the Met's Diplomatic Protection Unit, flashed a warrant card and handcuffed her for a COVID-19 violation. A bus CCTV captured both of them together before Wayne drove her nearly 80 miles to Kent. There, it dawned on Sarah that this wasn't an arrest. She had actually been abducted by a police officer. Wayne forced himself on her, strangled her, and later burned her body before dumping the remains into a pond. Sarah's boyfriend reported her missing, and search parties were immediately formed to look for her. Investigators grew suspicious of Wayne and tracked his route through CCTV and ANPR cameras, ultimately leading to the area where Sarah's body was partially destroyed. Her remains were recovered on March 10th, and the post-mortem report confirmed death by neck compression. Wayne was first arrested for kidnapping on March 8th, but then was re-arrested on March 10th under the charge of murder. He pled guilty to all of the charges, and on September 30th, Lord Justice Fulford sentenced him to life in prison without parole. The judge also stressed the fact that Wayne had abused public trust by misusing his uniform to deceive and kill. But the case didn't end there. An inquiry later revealed multiple red flags, including past allegations and indecent exposure incidents that were conveniently ignored during his recruitment. That man should have never been in a uniform. Sarah's murder sparked outrage across the UK, not just over one man's actions, but a broken system that enabled him in the first place. People, and especially women, demanded answers, reforms, and above all, the right to feel safe. That's it for today's video. If you want to be shocked to the bone by more raw and unfiltered moments like these, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.